Hello everybody, my name is Alberto Marquez, and in this video we will discuss some concepts in Arena for the basic modules. We will work on the clone model and we will explore other possibilities that the combinations of modules can allow us. Very good. Let's start with, in basic models, we will create basic processes. We will create and then select a process, and then after we process this entity, let's say that we make a clone. And the clone option allows us to make copies of the entities in such a way that we can generate and we can transfer them to alternative processes to be processed in parallel. Say for instance you have a manufacturing order and some of it would have to do some paperwork in the office, including requests for materials and so on, and in other place maybe the tooling needs to be set up, and at the same time this could be happening and you need to submit this order to different places. So we would create a clone, so each one of the entities does in parallel what is needed in different processes. So in order to do that, we select the label, and after the label we can continue with further processes. And the original entity will be destroyed. It's no longer needed, so we can dispose it after we clone it into two separate entities. And maybe after that we can maybe separately dispose these entities, and we can guide the entities with these links through the alternative processes that we have. And let's see, for the clone we need to select which ones are the entities. We are going to create one clone that is going to go to label 1. We could send more than one clone to label 1, but at this moment let's just send one to label 1 and another one to label 2. And the original entity will be disposed here. So a copy will go to label 1, it will enter into process 2, and the other will enter to process 3. For us to be able to see what really is going on, we are going to select sys delay release with resource 1, sys delay release, and instead of resource 1 we are going to use resource number 2. So they are not competing for the same resource, and then sys delay release using a resource number 3. And if you go to the list of resources, you have here the list of resources and you have one of each one. Very good. So if we run this model now, the entities are being copied into one of the clones goes to label 1, the other clone goes to label 2. The original entity is disposed, and eventually the clones are disposed after being processed in the respective processes. So this is very useful when you have parallel processes and we're going to consider other options. Now let's start again, and we will start with create, and then we will assign, and this assignment will generate the part number. And after we do this, what we do is we separate these entities. This is very similar to clone, but you will see it's slightly different because this does not send the parts to labels. It will continue through the process in a logical way, and then maybe I can implement a process for one for the original, one for the copy, and after we separate them, maybe we can batch them again. In other words, we are going to bring them back together, right? But we're going to make this a little bit more challenging, because we are going to have a decision and another decision here. Okay, so let's implement the logic. We collect the process to the decide, the process to the decide. In the separate, we are going to split. We're going to duplicate the original, and we are going to generate one duplicate. By generating one duplicate, you will see now that we have an alternative location for the duplicate here in the separate area, in which we can link this duplicate with the next process. So when we look at the whole thing again, this is what we have. Now, with a certain probability, let's say that with a 90% probability, we go to decide one, and the same thing with the 90% probability, we move forward on this node. If that is true, we proceed to the batch. But if it's not true, we will reprocess this entity in the previous process in such a way that maybe the entities will lose the sequence in which they were generated. So here the entity is generated. In the assignment process, we will make two assignments. We will assign first a variable, and the variable will be the last entity, and the value will be last entity. I'm going to avoid the spaces to avoid problems, and I will select last entity plus 1. And that's a variable. The variable will keep counting how many entities we have. And also, what we are going to do is in the attribute for this entity, in the entity I'm going to call for this entity this entity ID is going to be the value of the last entity at that time. Okay, that will not keep changing because it's not reassigned. It's only assigned in this node, in this module, and the entity will keep that attribute unchanged until if I want to change it again in another assignment, in another assigned module. So now the entities are particularly identified. They go into the separate. In the separate, they are duplicated, and one is going to the original, go through the process, and come back. And now some of them are going to be processed. I will use a syslin release to require one resource, so there are queues, and on the other I will not have a resource. I will just have the delay, so that might shuffle a little bit the process, and now the entities not necessarily are going to be in the same order by the time they come to the batching process. In the batching process, I will request that the batch will be permanent from that moment on, so it's not temporary. After we batch them together, that's going to be definitive, and we're going to batch two entities based on an attribute, and that attribute is going to be this entity ID. Okay, so what will happen is that only the entities that started together will be batched together, but they may be in different order, and we will see how this works. After that, we can add other processes for the already batched entity, and maybe a dispose. Notice that there is a queue for process 4 because we have a resource request, and we have a queue in the batching process because we have to wait for the matching process to happen, given the fact that we have alternative part identification, and we're batching based on those entity identification. So we have that, and we run it. And there you go. We separate them, we process them separately, but maybe the parts have to match each other precisely on the part ID, and this could represent orders that come and belong to a particular customer, and each customer when they are reassembled together to have their parts exactly for their own product. And here you have it. It's running very well, and I hope it is clear, the example.